Is your wallet a little lighter than usual after the holiday season? Consider it money well spent, because you deserve to live your best life, and the Chime checking account wants to help you live yours to the fullest. A little extra money goes a long way, which is why the Chime checking account has tons of benefits that millions of members love, like fee-free overdraft up to $200 for eligible members, no monthly fees, and access to over 60,000 easy-to-find and fee-free ATMs. You even get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit, all while managing your money on the go, including sending and receiving money fee-free with friends that aren't even on Chime. Sign up for Chime today for you and your wallet. Get started at chime.com/goals24. That's chime.com/goals24. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Access to direct deposits up to 2 days early depends on the timing of the submission of the payment file from the payer. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply.
This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
African American History Month on MIP. Once again, welcome back today. Continuing our conversation, Total Tony Browder for the total month of February. IKG-info.com, ASA Restoration Project.com, the founding director of IKG Cultural Resources and the director of the ASA Restoration Project, taking us all the way back home to talk about our history. Welcome back, Tony.
My pleasure. Glad to be back, brother.
Now, obviously, there's this current movement going on in and around critical race theory and teaching our history, teaching anybody's history that's non-European for that matter. And that is of great concern to a great many people. You mentioned Asa Hilliard and his impact upon you and enlightening you. In one of your books, and folks, just want to remind everyone that Tony Browder has authored or co-authored 14 publications which are currently used in classrooms around the world. But folks want to stop that. Here's one of his publications, one of his most famous ones, right here. And just want to talk about history and the role of history momentarily. I believe, and there was a quote here from Dr. Clark, and
history being the clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day.
Well, yes, that is one, but there was another one too, where he described history. Where is it? I just saw it. History as being in the present.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us about that, if you will. And folks, as you know, Dr. Clark, the one, at least one of the mutual mentors, we had several, Dr. Ben Sharshi, but probably the mentor that had some of the greatest impact on Tony and me, because he really showed an interest in us.
Sure.
Was Dr. John Henry Clark. I mean, he showed a very keen personal interest in us and in our lives.
Yes, indeed.
And would give us advice about what we should and shouldn't be doing. But talk to us, if you would. Yeah, the quote about where we are on the political clock, but also that history is current. And in the last show, Tony, I'll throw this out to you then, maybe you address all of this. You talked about, in the context of Dr. Hilliard, going back and proving that there just wasn't one Negro dynasty. And you said that, which is true, a lot of people have tried to accuse us as African Americans of seeking the knowledge you're providing,
yes,
to compensate for our enslavement experience, when in fact it's really the other way around. This knowledge was kept from us in order to enslave us.
Right. And you know, the past has been erased and the erasure has been forgotten in order to separate Egypt from Africa and African people from their history and culture. So one of the things that that the scholars that we knew and love, Matsamela, one of the things that they did throughout their careers, which endeared them to us, was that they showed us the truth, information that I was never taught in elementary school, high school, or college, even though I attended an HBCU. This information has been verboten, if you will. So, I refer to it as forbidden knowledge, and we know that the truth will set you free. Dr. Clark said that all history is a current event. What happened 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, 5,000 years ago, creates cycles in time and repeats itself. I want to share with you this brilliant quote from Ivan Van Sertima, who I referenced in our discussion last week, who was the person who first put me on this path. Van Sertima said that the streets we walk on were made by the dead. The houses we live in were built by the dead. The books we read were written by the dead. The dead live in us. They reside in our consciousness. What happened 5,000 years ago and what happened 5 minutes ago occupies the same space in consciousness. And whoever determines your consciousness determines whether you live or die in this life. That's why this battle for the restoration of the minds of African people is so critical. And you're holding a copy of my second book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. You mentioned that my books are used in classrooms throughout the United States. My books are also used and read in prisons throughout the United States. I would dare say that the Browder file is probably the most read books in prisons. And I get dozens of letters from inmates, initially male inmates, but now more female inmates, telling me that for the first time in their lives, they're reading something about the history that makes them feel good. If I had known this information 10 years ago, I wouldn't be doing 10 years to life. How can I get this information to my children so that they don't follow my mistakes? I had an instance where I sent a copy of Nile Valley Contributions to an inmate in prison, paid for it. I said, we give inmates a discount on all of our publications. This brother wrote me back and said, when he finally received the book, certain pages were torn out of the book because they were viewed to be undesirable. I've had other instances where some of my books, the Browder file, were sent back to me because this information is not allowed for inmates. And now there's an effort to restrict all books, particularly Black books, from being sent to prisons, and that prisons now have a central book distributorship, where if those books aren't in that distributorship, they don't get sent to prisons. So this attack against African knowledge is not new. It's been going on for as long as I've been alive. And Mark, Massimella, we were around in the 80s when Brother ASA was initiating the Portland Baseline Essays. And that was being used as an effort to initiate an African-centered initiative here in Washington, D.C. And we saw how people shut that down. I spent 9 months, myself and a cadre of 25 historians, educators, and community organizers spent 9 months meeting every Thursday in the office of the superintendent of the District of Columbia, hammering out a curriculum, an African-centered curriculum. And they fired the superintendent. They snatched the money that had been allocated for their project and just eradicated all the work that we've done. So this attack that we see now against critical race theory is just racism rearing its ugly head once again. And it occurs, it's a cycle, it's cyclical. Our history is a current event. This is nothing new. It happens around every 20 years or so. These attacks resurface. So it reminds me of the need for us to begin to consolidate this information within our communities, within our households. So we should not rely on the schools in our communities to be responsible for teaching our children their history. Every home, every Black home should be a classroom. Every Black home should have Black books. Black families should sit down with their children and read this information, not just during February, not just during Black History Month, because it was Dr. Woodson's intent that we would study our history all throughout the year, but we would showcase what we had learned during the month of February.
More MIP after this message. Here's the quote specifically that I wanted to lift up. The events, this is Dr. John Henry Clark, the events which transpired 5,000 years ago, 5 years ago, or 5 minutes ago, 5 years from now, or 5,000 years from now, all history have determined what will happen 5 minutes from now. All history is a current event.
Absolutely. That's
Now,
why you study the past.
So
Because the past is prolonged. That's the issue. The past is prolonged. And when someone erases your past, you have no present moment and you have no future.
I want to repeat that, y'all, because I kind of messed it up. Let me just repeat that. The events which transpired 5,000 years ago, 5 years ago, or 5 minutes ago have determined what will happen 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, or 5,000 years from now. All history is a current event. All right, I want people to understand that. That's from Now Valley Contributions to Civilization. I can't trace it or footnote it, but I read somewhere years ago, and I haven't even found it since. You mentioned Du Bois in the last show, that he even said at one time, it might be in The World in Africa, but he said by the time the Europeans discovered Kemet and Africa, all of that, that the whole of human ingenuity had already been exhausted. In other words, all of the sciences and everything we do today, you know, obviously new things are being created all the time. But the foundation of that ingenuity had already been established by our ancestors.
Dr. Clark expressed that same sentiment a bit more eloquently, as is his way. He said that over half of human history was over before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house with a window. That's classic Dr. Clark. Took no prisoners.
Now look, you can't do his voice, can you, Tony? I've learned how to do it.
Not right now.
I can hear him now, though.
Catch me in another moment.
Half of human
history was over before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house with a window. And classic Dr. Clark, when people wanted to debate him and argue these points, I only debate my equals. All others I teach. Love that man. Love that man to life.
I remember folk who wanted to debate me. And I said, no. Let me go get Dr. Clark. No, we don't want to debate him. I said, wait a minute. I'm not your equal. I don't have a PhD. I won't mention their names right now, but folk wanted to say, I said, well, let me go get Dr. Clark or Dr. Jeffrey. And I'll moderate the debate. No, I'm debating you, Mark Thompson, because they didn't want to take on.
Exactly. Exactly.
And to be honest with you, I still kind of want to debate anyway. But even without my doctorate. So no, that's absolutely true. So you mentioned Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro, but speaking of the Browder files, one of the popular essays you have in there is about the creation of the Negro, isn't it?
Absolutely. And again, this idea, this concept was given to me by Dr. Clark, because he said he referenced a book by Richard Moore, The Name Negro, Its Origins and Abuse, something to that nature. There's no such thing as a Negro. A Negro was a concept that was created by the Portuguese and the French to describe people. All people have a name that associate them with land, language, history, culture, and philosophy. There's Europe, study European history, Asia, Asian history, Italian history. There's no place called Negro land, colored land, black land. So if we aren't Negroes, and if we aren't colored, and if we aren't black, who are we? So we've been trying to answer that question for over a century. That's why we change our names about every 25 years or so. We're still searching to restore that which was illegal and that which was taken away, and that which is our right to do.
You also, just one more thing today, you also have in the book the ancient proverb, which you modernize, know thyself. I don't know whether you have it in front of you. You want to read it, or shall I?
Go ahead and read it. Okay. That's good.
A person Listen to this, folks. A person who knows not and knows not that they know not is foolish. Disregard them. A person who knows not and knows that they know not is simple. Teach them. A person who knows not and believes that they know is dangerous. Avoid them. A person who knows and knows not that they know is asleep. Awaken them. A person who knows and knows that they know is wise. Follow them. All of these persons reside in you. Know thyself, and to ma'at be true.
Absolutely. So that statement is a statement that I modified. There was a DJ on WOL back in the 70s who would end his show with a version of that, and I just modified it in order to have it fit within the framework of the book. And I referenced ma'at. Ma'at is the ancient African principle, female principle, who represents truth, justice, righteousness, balance, harmony, order, and reciprocity. Ma'at was represented in the Nile Valley as a female figure, and what's so critically important about that representation of Ma'at from an artistic standpoint is that it is the first depiction in history of a human being with wings, a figure that we now refer to today as an angel. That's an African concept. That's Ma'at. And so if we understand the African origins of concepts and ideas without bragging, without taking away anybody else's history or culture, all we're doing is putting information in its correct chronological context. And as Dr. Hilliard taught us, context is everything.
Amen. Amen. Tony Browder with us, folks, throughout this African American History Month. IKG-info.com, ASA Restoration Project.com. Thank you, Tony. Talk tomorrow.
Thank you, brother. Peace.
More MIP after this message. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us now, Senior Economic Advisor to President Biden, Jared Bernstein. Jared, how are you, sir?
I am well. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you also. So, Black employment is increasing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And Black unemployment is declining. The Black rate remains elevated relative to the overall rate, and that is something of great concern to us. We want to do everything we can to bring that rate down and ensure that everyone who comes into this labor market benefits from the president's policies that are generating one of the tightest job markets in generations, some of the fastest GDP growth in generations, but it's essential to us that that growth reach everyone, not just those at the top of the scale.
Now, the unemployment rate, I think in December was 7.1%, is down to 6.9%. And that is not a lot, but what would you attribute that change to? What happened in January, do you think?
Well, one of the things that happened in January is we had a very strong month of job growth. Now, we try to be careful here at the White House not to emphasize 1 month too much, because these numbers jump around month to month. So if we take the underlying trend, we added 540,000 jobs per month over the past 3 months. That is a pretty breakneck pace of job gains. As the president said this morning, 6.6 million jobs over his first year in office. That is an historical record. You mentioned the Black unemployment rate from December. Probably a better way to look at that is to go back to January of 2021. A year ago, the unemployment rate for Blacks was 9.2%, over 9%. Now it's slightly below 7%. That's an important gain. And it's a reminder that when the overall job market tightens up as much as it has, the benefits tend to flow disproportionately to those in the bottom half of the pay scale. So that is one of the things that this president has consistently pushed for.
So you mentioned too how we still want to get that unemployment number to go down.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the ways that this White House thinks that can happen?
one of the most important things to do is to just keep pushing this tight labor market. Just to underscore something I said a second ago, the benefits of tight labor markets traditionally benefit communities of color disproportionately. That is, when the unemployment rate goes up, they used to say the unemployment rate, sniffles and communities of color catch a cold. Well, it works that way in reverse. When the job market tightens, the benefits disproportionately accrue to those in the lower end of the pay scale. And we have seen pretty breakneck growth of pay, of income, of job gains for folks in the bottom half, in many cases beating inflation. So we have to make sure that the job market stays as tight as it is, but that's not enough. Longer term, we have to make sure that we're adequately funding HBCUs so that members of the Black community can access a college education. We have to implement some of our student debt ideas the president has pushed for ever since the campaign to help folks carrying debt, again, disproportionately persons of color. Housing has been something that he's always pushed us hard on in terms of our equity agenda, making sure that low-income housing is far more accessible and affordable, and that has always been part of his Building Back Better agenda and remains so.
Now, Build Back Better, if it were to actually be implemented, pass and be implemented, that would also help with these jobs too, wouldn't it? It would create more jobs.
Oh, absolutely. Building Back Better would be the way we think about that right now. So you take some of the components that are in Building Back Better, and think about specifically how they would help. Probably one of the most important is childcare. And I think this helps communities of color in two ways. One, accessible, affordable childcare means that caretakers, disproportionately moms, can find a path into the labor market and can pay for childcare without breaking the budget. And the president's plan has people paying from 0 to a top of 7% of their income on childcare. That is affordable childcare, and that's key. But also, many members of the Black and Brown community work in the childcare sector, and the president's childcare agenda improves the quality of those jobs. So it's a real twofer in terms of helping communities of color.
Are we moving into a place, Jared Bernstein, where we're going to have to break up the pieces of Build Back Better to get them through, or is there still hope that the whole package will get through the Senate?
Well, I'm an economist, not a legislative person, and I certainly don't do legislative negotiation on TV. So I'll leave that to people whose job it is. The president has talked about it in the following way. He came here to Washington with an agenda to not just make sure that GDP grows, not make sure the economy expands. That certainly occurred with some of the fastest growth in 40 years in 2021, but to make sure that that economic growth reaches every community in America, particularly communities that have been traditionally left behind. Build the components of Building Back Better, whether we're talking about childcare, the cost of prescription drugs, education, housing, building wealth for communities of color. Think of that as the connective tissue between a growing macroeconomy and the prosperity of communities of color. That's the kind of policy glue that the president wants us to pursue. How we do it, how we negotiate it, whether we pull this out or put that back, that's obviously a key legislative issue that you can talk to our legislative team about. But from an economic perspective, that's the idea. Make sure that we have a policy agenda in place that ensures that a growing economy reaches all of the folks who are contributing to that growth.
Jared Bernstein, Senior Economic Advisor to President Joe Biden, we thank you for joining us today, my friend.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.